First of all, I'm very glad that I came back to this event this year because I participated with great pleasure to the last events, and I consider that it is a very successful conference every year, and the quality of the papers that were presented here that I follow very closely was very, very high. So I will try to be in line with the quality of the papers that were presented until now. First of all, I haven't written something on the screen, so you have to follow me. I wrote several articles and chapters dedicated to this issue, but so I can distribute that to you after my intervention. So I will launch some ideas, some reflections, some challenges that are concerning all of us. First of all, Orthodoxy has a particular problem for the people that are here in the room with from Radu region. The problem of canonical territory, in the sense that the Orthodox Church is divided into national churches along the modern states lines and along the formation of the nations, but not in all the cases. Why? Because we had until the fall of Constantinople, we had in the Orthodoxy, we have a single jurisdiction for all Orthodox. Namely the Byzantium, the Patriarchate in Istanbul. But after the fall of Constantinople, it was very hard to maintain that unity, because a lot of people from the Byzantine Empire went to exile in many parts of Europe, and there was no solution to have to keep an eye on this huge diaspora that was very active in the Balkans, in Romania, in Italy, in Greece, all over Europe. So it's a very unknown history of Europe, let's say. So the solution of the ecumenical patriarchate was to say that it has jurisdiction, canonical jurisdiction in the diaspora, wherever there are Orthodox believers. And even now, in the Ukrainians that are living in the US or in Canada naturally belongs to the ecumenical patriarchate. And even now the Greeks living in the US or Canada are part of this ecumenical patriarchate. So they don't have the problems of Greeks living in Greece, for example, to choose the jurisdiction and so on. But in some cases was very, very hard to achieve this jurisdiction. For example, in the case of Romania, it was, I would say, very easy. Why? Because nevertheless, Romania is a unitary state with 90% Romanians and with 10% minorities. So it was not very hard to achieve at the end of the 19th century the autocephaly of the church, to proclaim the church and to say that the Romanian church does have jurisdiction on the Romanian believers on the territory of Romania, and of course in the diaspora, even if we had some fights with the diaspora, especially during the Cold War, during communism, for obvious reasons. I mean, every Orthodox church had this problem. But the most problematic issue is about Orthodoxy in Russia. Why? Because Russia pretended, after the fall of Constantinople, to be the third Rome. What does it mean, the third Rome? It means that to keep entirely the tradition of the Orthodox faith instead of ecumenical patriarchate. So for the Moscow Patriarchate, it's essential to deny any kind of power, any kind of jurisdiction of the ecumenical patriarchate, because otherwise the myth of the third Rome will prove to be useless. And I would say that this myth of the third Rome was used for political purposes. This is the reality. All rulers of Russia, no matter the ideological opinion, they promoted the myth of the third Rome in order to find legitimacy. Why? Because the situation was complicated from the very beginning in Ukraine, especially with the fact that Ukraine belonged to ecumenical patriarchate for a very long period, but in the same time was the birthplace of Russia. Russians are saying that there was a kind of political entity called Rus. It was ruled by Vladimir in Kiev, and then it transferred its power to Moscow. But in fact, there is no continuity between the ancient Rus and Russia, how it was developed after 17th century. So we have here the second myth of a perfect continuity between a medieval state and the modern state, which is not the case for a lot of reasons. One of the reasons is that the first patriarchy in Ukraine was called the Patriarchy of Kiev and Moscow. So at the time, after the Mongol invasion, there was no difference between Kiev and Moscow. Moscow was I would say, a very small town that was not so developed as Kiev. So Moscow was considered to be alongside Kiev as regards jurisdiction. But then the Russian Church started to pretend that they're independent and to deny the Kiev Patriarchate, and even to absorb them at the end of the 17th century. A moment that does have different interpretations even right now. So the peace treaty that was signed in 1683 has very different interpretations from Russia and Ukraine right now, and gave rise to a dispute, a theological dispute. Russians are saying from that moment, there was no jurisdiction of the ecumenical patriarchate on the territory of Ukraine. On the contrary, Ukrainians saying that there was not the case, and there was a perfect continuity between jurisdiction of the ecumenical patriarchate and the current situation. So you see, all started from a different interpretation from a very, very old issue. The third myth that created this situation is Ruski Mir. And this is a new myth, let's say, that was created. I mean, when we talk about myths, we talk about something that is very ancient. But I would say, even if you disagree from a philosophical perspective, that it acquired the status of the myth because it was used as the other two myths that I have explained. So using the Ruski Mir myth, Russians are saying that wherever Russian lives, there is a place for the Russian Church. Other Orthodox churches do not believe in this. They do not find any theological justification for this kind of Ruski Mir. But in fact, Ruski Mir is a political myth, and does have only, how to say, a theological side. It's not based on theology, not at all, but does have a political side. This is a political issue. And I would say that this political myth of Ruski Mir was used by Russia even to expand this jurisdiction in Africa. Just before Ukraine invasion, it was a strong discussion about the jurisdiction in Africa, because because Russia does have interest in Africa, political interest, as you know. They pretended that there is also jurisdiction for all Orthodox believers in Africa, which is a lie. And the whole discussion was only interrupted by the Ukraine invasion. And it will start again. I mean, Chinese want to be present in Africa, but they do not pretend that their religion is the religion of people living in Africa. But on the contrary, Russians are using Orthodoxy as an instrument for the Christian believers, for submitting the Christian believers in Africa. Is there any relationship between a recent Catholic growing in Africa and this kind of pressure from Russian side? I don't know. Time will say. What happened after the Russian invasion of Ukraine? Some awful things. I mean, we had this autonomous Ukrainian church that belongs to the Ecumenical Patriarchate. Russians were not happy about it, and it raised a new division inside the Orthodoxy. But I would say that the things were manageable, in the sense that the Ukrainian church asked for to be recognized by other Orthodox churches. The Romanian Orthodox Church had the right position to say, we will recognize when all the churches will recognize, because otherwise it will be a schism inside the church. Ukrainian church said, okay, we will wait somehow until the final recognition, but then the Russian invasion started. What happened afterwards? A fourth myth started to emerge, a fourth attitude of the Russian Church, of the Moscow Patriarchate started. And I would say that this is not only a myth, this is not only an attitude, but something that we know from political discourse. I would say bluntly, frankly, it is hate speech. So Patriarch Kirill started to use hate speech in order to justify the war, which is not only shameful, but also raise a very delicate question. Can we maintain unity inside Orthodoxy if a church decided to use hate speech instead of love speech? And this is a very serious problem that it's more important than the war, I would say. Is it possible that the church use hate speech again and not love speech as it used to be? How can we maintain in the future the unity? The answer of the Ukrainian church was not only to consolidate its autonomy, but also to speak about to ask for the Russian church in Ukraine to separate from Moscow. So in 2023 it was a separation, but I would say that it was only a simulation and not a real separation, for many reasons that I don't want to present in details. For example, the Russian church in Ukraine still use some saints in the calendar that are introduced by Russian church after 2022 in order to justify the invasion. I mean, there are some saints. It's a whole hagiography in the Russian church. I mean, there are some warrior saints, let's say, used to justify the invasion, and it's it's not easy to understand very well the propaganda, because, for example, they canonize one admiral, Ushakov, and in Russian propaganda you can see movies about this admiral Ushakov, but not saying anything about his religion, but the church should say the movie that you are seeing is our martyr Admiral Ushakov. So it is very complicated, but nevertheless, I'll try to explain it in brief words. The Russian Church from UK said, no, we are separate from Moscow, but we maintain the saints, and not only the saints, but also in the calendar, they maintain their bishops that are from different parts of Russia. Nevertheless, Ukraine, the Ukrainian state, intervened in this dispute. It was a mistake in my view, but only history will judge if it was or not. This is my perspective, that always it's a mistake for the state to intervene in a religious affairs, but nevertheless, so the Ukrainian state gave a law saying that all the churches have to be integrated into the Ukrainian church, and guess what? The time limit was 20th of May 2025. It means 3 days ago. No measures have been taken so far. So the main question in Kyiv right now is, do the law will be applied or not? We will see. But this raises a very interesting issue. The fact that in Ukraine there is not only one dispute inside the Orthodoxy, but multiple disputes, as my title said. For example, Romanians in Ukraine are Orthodox, but they are part of the Moscow Patriarchate, and they don't want to quit. Why? Are they so Russian friends? Are they in love with the aggressor? No. The explanation is very simple. The fact that the Moscow Patriarchate created theology schools where priests can learn in Romanian. KGB officers ordained as bishops that know very well Romanian. So now Romanians are saying where we have to go, because Ukrainian church priest doesn't know Romanian, but we still have some priests that can speak in our language. That's a real problem. And this is not solved. Recently, I mean last year, some members from Russian community tried to enroll one association called Romanian Orthodox Church in Ukraine, and Ukrainian authorities opposed, saying that they will not recognize such an association, such an NGO, until the Romanian Orthodox Church will recognize the separation of the Ukrainian Church and the subordination of the Ukrainian Church to the Ecumenical Patriarchate. So they are trying to combine one political issue and one legal issue with one purely theological issue. I hope that this question will be solved, but this adds a new dimension to this war inside Orthodoxy. And I will say something. What is the result so far of this war? You might think that it's a strong belief of normal people that are on one side or another. No. The reality is harsh. The result is that people in Ukraine are started to be more secular and not going to the church. And if we don't give any solution to this conflict, the secularism will grow in Ukraine. And this is the unhappy result of not having a solution. Thank you.